It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
In a roaring stadium, their silence is deafening. 136 Israelis are still being held hostage by Hamas. Bring them home.
Hello, welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and our match report from Forest's 3-2 defeat on Saturday at home to Newcastle United. A 3-2 loss. How often have we said that recently? Newcastle took the lead through Bruno Guimaraes after 5 minutes before Forest got on level terms through Anthony Elanga. There were 2 goals towards the end of the first half as Fabian Schär put Newcastle ahead before Callum Hudson-Odoi grabbed the equaliser in the 6th minute of first half stoppage time. A decent second half followed from Forest, but they were undone by an individual error as Elanga's misplaced pass was punished by Guimaraes, meaning Newcastle got all 3 points. I'm your host, Baz. I'm your host, George. I've got Baz alongside me. Both of us were at the game. Baz, Forest were okay yesterday. They played quite well, had the better chances, and in the end were perhaps unlucky not to get anything from the game.
Yeah, I was. My feeling at the end of it was disappointment more than anything else, because I thought overall it was a pretty decent performance, but yeah, we just couldn't defend ourselves and stay away from another 3-2 defeat.
Yeah, how often have we said that recently? Quite a lot, I think. We'll get onto the team news and the key events in a sec, but firstly, we'll get the view from the opposition from Jack from the Toon Under podcast.
Hi, it's Jack from the Toon Under podcast, Australian-based Newcastle supporters. First of all, this was good for us to get a bit of revenge from Boxing Day, the Chris Wood show. So it was nice for us to get the win. We have been scoring a lot of goals lately. We've also been conceding a lot, so it maybe wasn't a surprise the game panned out this way. Even though really there weren't that many clear chances for either side, despite there was a lot of goals. There was a lot of sort of clinical finishing going on. The game did play out kind of as expected, I think. So the control that we had in the first 25 minutes was really good. Obviously got the goal, which was a really fantastic goal for us. I know that Forest have had problems with set pieces this season, and we've actually been quite good with set pieces. That was obviously a training ground one that worked out. But I think as soon as Forest scored with Elanga, he kind of came back into it quite a lot, and it was probably even from that point in terms of chances and possession. So we saw it out. I think we saw it out well in the second half. There wasn't that many chances created against us. The big one, of course, was the penalty shout. First of all, terrible defending from us just to let a goal kick bounce through like that. I think we got away with this, really. You'd be screaming for that if it was the other way around. Maybe Dubravka was saved by the fact that he didn't go into Awoniyi with kind of force. He sort of pulled out a bit, and then the striker initiated contacts. So when the referee had made that decision on the pitch, it's probably not going to get overturned as a clear and obvious error, even though there was clearly contact, and I think we got away with that a bit. So I think Forest, I know the home form's not being as good. I think there's enough there to see that they got decent players and are going to cause teams problems. Bruno was on one of his good games today where he just steps up. He's a Brazilian international, and he does this from time to time where he just plays so well. We were very scared about Elanga for this game after the St James's Park game against Dan Burn, but I think Howe managed to sort of put Dan Burn into more of a back three today, so there was less space, apart from the goal that did happen, of course. So good luck to Forest for the rest of the season. Good luck for the court case that's coming up about the points deduction. Hopefully that goes your way and you stay in the Premier League for next season. Cheers.
Thank you, Jack. We'll get on to everything that Jack mentioned in a minute, but I think he's right. You can see why Newcastle drew 4-4 to Luton last week. They showed that at times defensively. We'll get on to Forest team news then. From the last Premier League game, which was away at Bournemouth, there was one change as Moussa Niakhaté replaced Andrew Omobamidele at the back. So Matt Sells was in goal. There was a back four of Nico Williams, Moussa Niakhaté, Murillo and Nuno Tavares. Nico Dominguez and captain Ryan Yates in midfield, with Morgan Gibbs-White just ahead of them. Callum Hudson-Odoi and Anthony Elanga on the wings, with Taiwo Awoniyi up front. On the bench, Matt Turner, Harry Toffolo, Felipe, Andrew Omobamidele, Cheikhou Kouyaté, Danilo, Giovanni Reina, Rodrigo Ribeiro and Divock Origi. So there's a few talking points there. I think firstly, Gibbs-White passing the fitness doubts that we maybe had of him after we saw him hobbling around for the last stoppage time against Bristol. I think the welcome return of Dominguez and Yates into midfield, because I think those two were really missed against Bristol. Danilo and Kouyaté often were a bit anonymous. And the big story then was Omobamidele dropped for Niakhaté, which I agreed with, a bit more physical prowess in there. And maybe Omobamidele, although he started well, I think Murillo often has to cover for him. So for me, I think that was pretty much our strongest 11, Baz.
Given the players we've got available, I think with Murillo as well, it's quite easy to forget that even though I think he's 22, but he's actually only been playing professional football for a year. He'd only been playing for 6 months for Corinthians when he came to us. So he's still, although he's a fantastic player, he's still quite inexperienced, even for a 22-year-old. So having an older head alongside him probably will help him out as well.
Yeah, and I think it did throughout the 90, and we'll get on to the goals that Forest conceded in a sec. But from kickoff, Newcastle made their intentions pretty clear. I was worried early on that it was going to be like the Arsenal game, and it was like walking football. But after Forest let Newcastle have the ball for the first few minutes, they took the chances to counter-attack. They'd make chances and press forward. Awoniyi created a chance for Forest early on, about 4 minutes in. He received it on the turn, sent it through for Tavares left wing, who jetted forward. I thought the keeper might come for it. So Tavares got there as he didn't, got there into the box and chipped it back in the middle, or played it back into the middle for the onrushing Gibbs-White. And he comes onto it in the box, decent position. And I think he had a bit more time than he thought. Shoots it first time left-footed, and it just whiskered wide with the bottom right corner. But it was a good move from Forest, and an early lead would have been crucial in that game.
It would have been good. It was kind of weird. So the opening sort of 15, 20 minutes, I'd have said, apart from maybe that break, I was quite a little bit worried. I thought Gibbs-White looked exhausted. I thought the team looked a little bit off the pace and slow, and Newcastle were proper dominating for the majority of the sort of first 10, 15 minutes, apart from that little break there. But that break also explained what our game plan was definitely for the first half, which was Botman and Dan Burn especially aren't necessarily the fastest, and we've got a load of players who are pretty fast. So let's draw them forwards and then go and hit them.
Yeah, and it wasn't until later on in the game that we saw Forest really exploiting it a bit more. But Newcastle were punished Forest for their mistake early after about 10 minutes. It all started with Sean Longstaff bringing it from midfield, striding through Forest midfield like it wasn't there. No one closed him down, and he got a shot from about 25 yards that Sells put out for a corner. The resulting corner was tipped behind for another corner from the other side, from the right. And then it was Almiron who took it, and Forest were expecting the ball into the box, but instead he takes it short for Trippier, who races from full-back to connect to it. Elanga presses in but doesn't get there as he whips it to the far post. And no one sees Bruno Guimaraes at the far post. It connects to it first time, volleys it back where it came from and into the bottom right corner. And it was a decent routine, I suppose. You've got to hold your hands up for Newcastle for that, but Forest can't really believe in Kieran Trippier free from that position.
No, well, this my impression as it happened was, we were expecting a ball into the box, and when it didn't happen, it was like we were utterly befuddled. We had no idea what was going on, and so that's why Guimaraes was left unmarked, was because we were so confused by the fact that they didn't do what we expected, and it's just naive and childish, really.
And it wasn't the first goal that Forest would concede from a set piece in the game, but we'll get onto that in a minute, because as the goal went in, Newcastle carried on playing with their slow football. Trippier was sort of slotted in midfield. It was a back three. It was almost like Man City, how they were playing last season. But a key feature we saw in the reverse game was Dan Burn via Elanga. And the first time we saw that was on 17 minutes. It was Niakate who played it into Taiwo, who was holding it up. And he'd done that a few times early on. He did that for the earlier chance that I mentioned. And he found Dominguez, who was facing forward. He fires it through to Elanga, who's sort of the underlap and run down the centre of the Newcastle defence. He beats Dan Burn, drives into the box, and from the right-hand side, gets a shot away. It's a huge chance, but he just puts it straight at Dubravka. You think from there, in the box, he's really got to try and chip it or fire it into the corner, hasn't he, this time?
Yeah, I mean, again, as I say, I thought for the beginning of the game, we were a little bit off the pace. And when Elanga did that, I was thinking maybe he's not fully recovered, he's not fully sharp after his injury. And it's still going to take him a few sort of matches to get fully up to speed. But it turns out that wasn't the case.
No, it took him a few minutes. So Forest did this again on 25 minutes. And it was Gibbs White for the first time really getting on the ball at the edge of the box and driving forward, because Lewis Miley was marking him at the game. I thought he did that really well. But Gibbs White this time gets on the ball and he drives forward. And Elanga making a similar run down through the middle of Newcastle defence. He plays it through perfectly. Dubravka this time chooses to come and try and get to the ball as Elanga is rushing there. But he's always going to win the race as the three Newcastle defenders and Dubravka all tried to get to the ball. It was Elanga who was the favourite for it. And you wonder what he was going to do, try and go around the keeper. But no, he composedly slots it under the goalkeeper. And he's a bit hot and cold in goal-scoring positions, Elanga, isn't he? But made the right decision this time.
First of all, I have to say it was an absolutely perfect through ball from Gibbs White. The way he just cut through their defenders for Elanga to run onto, and then part of my heart was in my mouth a little bit as he went forwards, and Dubravka started coming out after the shot before. But I don't know, it's almost like he underhit it because it went in really slowly.
It did, but the City ground was celebrated long before it went into the net. I think unless there was a pitch invader from the away end that was going to kick it away, it was always going to go in. And I think that really woke the game up. Suddenly Newcastle looked a bit rattled. The City ground was quite vocal, not that we've seen that really this season. And, it was a good game. A lot's been spoken about Anthony Taylor, but challenges were flying in and he was letting a lot go. So the game sort of really kicked into shape then, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean... A quick word about Anthony Taylor. He basically decided he was going to not stop the game for anything, which I have to say probably, I mean, we'll get onto the second half later, but it probably worked in our favour to some extent because I thought Yates could have been down for 3 yellow cards in the first half. But the other thing that I noticed then is after our goal, Newcastle's defence did look really, really shaky. They didn't like it when we played at them.
No, I don't think Forest did that enough in the end. But you mentioned Yates nearly getting 3 or 4 yellow cards. One of the challenges that he made actually cost Forest because he made a pretty silly challenge on halfway. The ball had gone, and I forgot who he brought down, but it was a pretty needless challenge, and it presented Newcastle with a chance to hoist it forward. And with the height that they've got, I don't think you can keep giving them set-piece chances like this. So it was Trippier who hangs it into the back post, and Forest just let the ball drop. So then it comes to Botman. He nods it back in towards goal, and Fabian Schär is free from 8 yards, and he rifles it home. Very similar goal to one that he scored at Villa Park, I think, a few weeks ago. And I think Alan Shearer said on Match of the Day last night, Forest have now considered the most set-piece goals in the Premier League. And against Newcastle, like I said, you can't give them chances like that.
No, and again, it's one of those things, that same things being said every single week, which is that's that second phase ball. So once the ball had been knocked down, it's like we get confused or get like rabbits in the headlights, and we don't know what to do to defend against it, because like if we don't get it on the first phase, then we're just stuck. And that's basically what happened again. It's the same thing, naivety and frailty.
Yeah, so the goal went in about 3 minutes before half-time. So if you went for an early pint or pie, you were punished because stoppage time would eventually be Old Forest. They had a chance, shout for a penalty when Dan Burn tussled Elanga to the floor, just sort of on the edge of the penalty area as he was driving into it. I think that was a bit soft, but Forest just kept going. And it was nice play between Dominguez before he cut inside, played a 1-2 with Hudson-Odoi as Hudson-Odoi received it back off him, curls inside from the right-hand side and slots it towards the far corner. It deflects off Lewis Miley, who's right in front of him, and goes into the net. 51 minutes, a lot of stoppage time there. But Forest got themselves back on level terms at half-time, and Hudson-Odoi once again showing his quality cutting in from the right and the confidence that he started to show really over the last few weeks. It's about time.
Yeah, I think this was one of his best games for us. I think early on in the first half, he didn't come forward very much, and I think that was partly because Nuno Tavares was there to look at Almiron, and then Hudson-Odoi was there to try and keep Trippier out of the game because Trippier's apparently got the most assists in the Premier League. But yeah, that bit afterwards, he started going forwards. He started proving he was quite dangerous, and it caused Trippier problems because Trippier wanted to bomb forwards, but he couldn't do now. And yeah, and that thing of him cutting in and then putting in that shot from sort of the edge of the box, that's becoming his little trademark there. He was a little bit fortunate, but it was a great chance to make.
It was. And you mentioned Tavares as well. I think he's a key part in why Hudson-Odoi has stepped up over the last few weeks, and probably why Nuno chooses Tavares over Toffolo, because it was him that got that pass out for Hudson-Odoi before he did the 1-2 with Dominguez. And I think he really drives the team forward, which in turn gives Hudson-Odoi confidence, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think I'd definitely say, in my view, Tavares was probably our player of the match. It's definitely his best performance for us. He was driving us forwards. He was attacking. He was decent defensively, which sometimes has been a bit of a question mark. But yeah, he was making things happen for us today, or yesterday rather.
So momentum carried straight on into the second half that Forest had at the end of the first. Straight from kickoff, they made a nice little move down the left, culminated in a header at the back post that Gibbs White couldn't get to, and then Yates had a shot that was blocked from the edge of the box. But Forest just carried on in the confident play that they had. They had the ball in the net after 50 minutes as Yates broke from midfield, and Newcastle were playing sort of a high line, but he slots it through to Awoniyi. He looked about a yard or two offside, but he did well to stride forward. Dan Burn was closing the angle and he rifled it into the net. Offside rightly given to rule that one out. But, a really good start from Forest, and they look like the team that were going to win the game if any team was.
Yeah, and again, Newcastle's defence carried on in that sort of shaky, slightly panicky kind of way. So, yeah, and the difference between the first half and the second half was we were in their half most of the time and making them feel that nerve. Whereas in the first half, we sat off them a lot more, trying to catch them on the break a bit. And yeah, definitely, certainly up to whatever, 60 or 70 minutes, I'd have said we were the team that deserved 3 points of that game.
Yeah, well, 100%. So Newcastle had a chance about 10 minutes into the half. They got down the right. It was the first attack really of the half. Longstaff and Trippier, and his cross was towards the back post. And I think if anyone else but Miguel Almiron had been on it, you'd have been worried. But he never looked like getting to the ball. If it's not on his left foot, I don't think he's any good really. But then a few minutes later, 62 minutes, Forest had a huge penalty appeal and a huge chance to score, I thought, really. They get a goal kick, and it's Matt Sells who plays at a really good distance, actually, all the way over the top. And it's one of them that maybe Dubravka could have came for, but with the doubts, with the goal that Elanga scored in the first half, maybe he leaves it. And that meant the ball drops for Taiwo on the edge of the box as he's racing towards goal. But his poor initial touch off his sort of knee, and it never really got control of the ball, really. And it went behind for a goal kick. But as it was going behind for a goal kick, the goalkeeper, Dubravka, is on the floor, stretching, reaching for the ball, doesn't get near the ball, and appears to bring down Awoniyi about 2 or 3 yards out in front of goal. VAR looked at it. Anthony Taylor was, a long way away from it, given in mind it was a goal kick. So maybe you can't expect him to see it, but VAR chose not to send him to the monitor. And, it's a big appeal for a penalty. I think most people in the ground and looking back on it would think it was a penalty. But personally, I think Taiwo's got to stick that chance away.
Well, actually, I think everyone's talking about Dubravka and his arm, but I think it was Cher. Part of the reason Taiwo was off balance was because Cher shoves him. Is like Cher's right on Taiwo's shoulder as he receives the ball. They both run in, and as I said before, Cher's not the fastest, so I think he shoves Taiwo beforehand, which is where he didn't have a great control of the ball, but that made the control even worse. And then Dubravka takes him down. I can see why it wasn't given, because Taiwo didn't have control of the ball, but I wouldn't have been surprised if it had been the other way. It probably would have been given. That's the galling thing about it, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is stark that pretty much everywhere you look on Twitter, all the organisations are saying it should have been a penalty. And for guys to go in Forest's favour in that way, then it must be a bit of a howler. But Forest continued bossing the game. Newcastle only had 2 shots in the second half, and they all came within 2 minutes of each other. The first one was a wild one from Anthony Gordon back midway through the half, and he was never going to really hit it on target from there. But I think it was more one in frustration, because Newcastle just never really looked like threatening Forest. But a minute later, they had another one and they made it count. Nick Williams made a nice tackle on the right. He won the ball back, and it breaks for Elanga, who is obviously then under Nuno trying to get Forest counter-attacking and on the transition very quickly. He tried to pick out Gibbs-White, but lurking was Bruno Guimaraes, as he was all game. He was everywhere. And as Jack said, he was fantastic on the night. Guimaraes pounces on it, and his first touch takes him towards the edge of the box. Then I think it's Dan Burn who gets in the way of Dominguez as he tries to get to him to block the shot. And then it opens up for Guimaraes to stroke it into the bottom right corner, composedly from inside the D, send the Newcastle fans celebrating. I don't think they'd have been looking through their binoculars most of the game at the far Forest end, but the first time Newcastle come forward, they score. Goalkeeper gets to it, diving to his left. Do you think he could have done better with that?
No, to be honest, I'm not surprised, because especially 3-4 minutes after the penalty appeal, that's the same as when we concede. It's like we just fall asleep a little bit, and yeah, we should have been sharper, and it shouldn't have got to that in the first place, really. Same old story.
Yeah, it's yet another defensive error, isn't it? And I suppose that's what you get for having a player like Elanga, a winger. Yes, you want your players to cover, but a winger in that position, often that could be the case, really.
If you think if it had been Gibbs-White who'd received the ball, then trying to play the ball forward to Elanga, it wouldn't have happened that way.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate circumstances, and yet again, Forest victim of that. So I don't think Forest heads dropped, though. Nuno was quite positive in his substitutions, bringing on Origi, Reina and Danilo, and I think his intentions were pretty clear. Tavares had a chance soon after the goal. He skipped into the penalty area past Trippier, and no one was really in the middle. I thought Origi could have made himself a bit of an option, so he decided to lash it towards goal. He had one early in the half that he ballooned high into the Trent end. This one was a bit closer, but he still couldn't get it on target. But Forest looked like they were going to get an equaliser.
I wouldn't have said that. I thought, actually, once Taiwo went off, and we were all expecting him to go off because for obvious reasons, I thought we lacked a bit of cutting edge. We were still making the run in, and we were dominating the possession, and the ball was still in Newcastle's half, but we didn't have that little bit of cutting edge with that. Newcastle looked much more comfortable when we had the ball once Taiwo had gone off. And it's that whole thing of, defenders don't really know how to deal with him. But Origi, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't scaring them. And so that meant that, they were just that little bit more comfortable. I also have to say a big change for Newcastle was, and I think it was before their goal, they took Almiron off and Harvey Barnes came on, and he was playing on the Gordon and Barnes swapped wings, so he was playing right in front of us, so he was getting a ton of stick for being a Leicester reject, but he actually helped them out a lot because they weren't they were able to keep the ball a little bit. When they cleared it, it wasn't coming straight back at them. He was making the difference in just being able to keep hold of the ball a little bit.
Yeah, and as the half went on, Newcastle slowly started to look a bit more confident, and Forest sort of dwindled, really. I think Newcastle's game management really came into it. As soon as they got up the foot on the ball, like you say, Gordon, Barnes were keeping it as far away as they could. And as 6 minutes of stoppage time were indicated, you wondered whether the pendulum would swing and Forest would get that chance, but it never really looked like coming in the end. So Forest couldn't get over the line. They lost in the end 3-2, and another defeat at home. We're going to have a short break. I'm sure you're sick of me and Baz moaning. So when we come back, we're going to discuss some positives from the game, some standout performances, Nuno's comments, and where it leaves Forest going forward.
The 1865 Match Report. We're pleased to announce that this episode of 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, is sponsored by Greene King Sport, where football is more than a game. Greene King Sport venues are showing every single televised Forest fixture over the 23-24 season. And with more than 900 sports pubs across the UK, it doesn't matter where you're based, you can catch every single minute of the action. If you download the Greene King Sport app, you won't just get 10% off all drinks anytime there's a match on the TV, but this month there's also free Guinness to be won and the chance to win one of 6 holidays. And you'll be supporting us here at 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. Now it's back to your podcast.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Hello and welcome back to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and our match report from Forest's 3-2 defeat at home to Newcastle on Saturday night. Let's look at some of the comments that Nuno said then after the game to Colin Fray. He said that we did a lot of good things in the match and we could have and should have changed the result, but we're still making mistakes that are costing us. He said that the goals we are conceding are far too easy for the opposition and we've got to be more switched on from set-piece situations. And on the penalty incident, he said that I've seen the replay and I don't understand how he hasn't given a penalty, especially with VAR and all the replays. I don't think you can argue with much that he said there.
No, I mean, as I said, I can understand why the penalty wasn't given that Taiwo didn't have it under control. It's whether you think it was what the reason that he didn't have it under control. But apart from that, if we knew how to defend set pieces and the second phase, 2-1 to us would have been a fair result, but we don't know how to defend. And I mean, you said at the end of the second half whether Forest could maybe pull one back, but there was this little bit of me with us playing so high up the pitch, basically camped in their half, that I was expecting a 4-2 defeat at the end of it.
Yeah, you wouldn't have been surprised it would have been so Forest to do that. But let's touch on the positives briefly. I thought Dominguez last night was fabulous. He's all over the park. He always gives 100%, winning tackles, and he was just generally a thorn in Newcastle's side. He was our version of Dominguez. I think Tavares, you also said, who was fabulous, and Giovanni Reina came off the bench and looked promising, I thought. But the one thing you want to touch on was Morgan Gibbs-White in the first half. Tell me about that incident. It was fabulous.
So this was right in front of me because I sort of sit near the halfway line. And it was a Newcastle attack, and Murillo does his little sprinting to recover kind of thing, gets his foot under the ball to clear it, but instead of going into row Z as you'd hope, it's like an up and under and just comes back and sort of lands about maybe 5-10 yards just inside the line. Gibbs-White uses his strength to push the Newcastle player off away from the ball. And then, it's coming down from like 20 or 30 yards, so must be at quite a pace, but he just traps it on the top of his foot, turns, beats his man, and then starts an attack. And as I say, it was right in front of me, and it was an absolutely majestic piece of skill that no one else in the Forest team could probably do.
Yeah, you're right. And not many players in the Premier League could do that. I could imagine it was a moment of real class. But on sort of Newcastle's performance, I mean, they only had 2 shots in the second half, 7 in total, and individual error set pieces costing us again. And it's the case in a relegation battle that these goals always seem to go in for you, and it doesn't seem to change.
The thing is, it's always individual errors, and it generally seems to be a different individual each time. But there's like a famous phrase, which is once is a mistake, twice is a choice. If we keep on letting it happen, it doesn't matter who actually makes the error. If we keep on letting it happen again and again and again, then that's a systemic problem. And I mean, Nuno has this reputation of being quite a defensive coach, and I mean, obviously he's still quite new to the job. But we need to get this sorted out because it is really, really costing us, and we're proper looking over our shoulders now.
And that's the frustration, because there was a couple of serial offenders. You look at Matt Turner, and we've spoken enough about him. And personally, I thought Gonzalo Montiel at fullback has been a liability over the past month. And the fact that he's not available for selection at the minute, I think will improve Forest defensively, although I'm not going to be happy that a player's injured. So taking away from the game then, I think it would have been crucial for Forest to get something out of the game, because you look at Everton and Luton not getting any results. Forest now sit 16th, just 2 points ahead of Everton. And if you look at above the table, Crystal Palace are 3 points, I think, ahead of Forest. We're slowly getting cut off, aren't we?
Yeah, and the worrying thing is that it's in our power. Obviously, we've got the potential points deduction to come, but it's in our power to get out of this. What has changed since Nuno's come in is we're scoring goals, which I don't know if that's just a confidence thing or whether Nuno's asked them to do something differently. I mean, I don't really see that much that we're doing differently on the pitch. It's just we're actually getting the goals at the end of it, or creating the chances and getting the goals, which maybe we weren't a few months ago. But that same thing of the defensive problems, we need to sort that out, because otherwise we are in trouble. I mean, we were kind of lucky as well that Luton didn't gain more ground as well.
Yeah. And I think you're right. That's a huge difference, because under Cooper, it was slightly more defensive, because we had the midfield three of Dominguez, Sangare, Mangala, Gibbs-White on the wing, and not enough balance, really. So we always slightly look better defensively. But now, because we look a bit better attacking with Gibbs-White in the middle, more balance on the wings, and more service to the strikers, it's then gone the other way, and we're now losing 3-2 instead of 2-0. So, yeah, I just want to touch finally on the home atmosphere, because I think we've seen this season why second season syndrome is such a big thing, because you see Forest were against the world last season. The City Ground for a tie against Crystal Palace were shouting, screaming, chanting from the start till the end. But now we're 17th in the home form table this season compared to 10th last season. We've lost more home games in the Premier League than we did in the whole of last season now. And it's just not the same at the City Ground anymore, is it?
I thought actually it was good yesterday. We're back to where we were before Steve Cooper came in, which is it takes something happening on the pitch to get us noisy, whereas it was the other way round last season. And I really enjoyed that last season. I thought it makes me feel part of it, and like I've got a little bit of control over what's happening on the pitch. But yeah, we were quite noisy yesterday, but we were also flat when things dropped off. And it'll be nice to get back to that, but I can completely understand why it's happening.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's back to being in spells, isn't it? And where last season, if you're 3-2 down with 15 minutes to go, everyone is singing Forest and Magic on and off the pitch and trying to get the lads over the line. People are instead leaving and walking over Trent Bridge. So I think that's the difference.
Or you hear a bit of there was a Yates, you're rubbish and all that kind of stuff coming in the stands, which didn't really happen as much last season.
Yeah, it's the unity that sort of evaded once Cooper left, and it was always going to go that way, I think. On a positive note, Derby remained the worst team in Premier League history after Sheffield United got a victory. So happy annual Derby Day, Baz.
Yes, that's still one of my a cherished fact that we will hold dear to us, even more than the Champions League, the European Cup one. This, you could stick your European Cups. We'll rather have Derby being the worst team in history. Yeah,
there was a time last season we thought Forest might overtake that, so it's a good job that teams are still flying high and evading that. I think that's about all we've got time for, so I think we'll leave it there as we reflect on Forest's continuing struggles at the City Ground, losing 3-2 to Newcastle. Thanks to Baz and thanks to Jack from the Tune Under podcast. And thanks, listener, for your time. We'll be back on Friday with the Friday 5 before the West Ham game next week. A game that looks like Forest have just got to get something now from. But until then, have a great week and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Social Podcast Network.